Welcome to Biggest Spoilars, the destination for exclusive spoilers, latest updates.
Port Charles has survived mob wars, courtroom betrayals, and life-altering revelations, but nothing could have prepared the town for what happened when Drew Kane took the witness stand. What was expected to be a careful, controlled testimony turned into a jaw-dropping moment that rewrote the entire case in seconds. One gesture, simple, unmistakable, and devastating, changed everything. Drew didn't hesitate. He didn't soften the blow. He raised his hand and pointed straight at the shooter. The gasp that followed echoed through the courtroom like a thunderclap, and from that instant on, no one was safe from the truth that had just been unleashed. The tension inside the courthouse was already unbearable long before Drew's name was called. Every bench was filled, every whisper sharp with anticipation. This was the testimony everyone had been waiting for, the moment that could either bring justice or plunge Port Charles deeper into chaos. Drew walked to the stand with measured steps, his expression calm but his eyes dark with memory. This wasn't easy for him. The events he was about to describe were burned into his mind, replaying endlessly in sleepless nights and sudden flashes of fear. Carly watched closely, her instincts screaming that something monumental was about to happen. Michael sat rigid, bracing himself. Nina looked uneasy, sensing danger creeping closer with every breath Drew took. The baptism was about to begin. Not of forgiveness, but of truth. When Drew began to speak, the courtroom grew deathly quiet. His voice was steady, but the emotion beneath it was unmistakable. He described the night of the shooting in painstaking detail, the confusion, the panic, the sound that shattered everything. He spoke of fear gripping his chest, of adrenaline clouding his thoughts, of the moment he realized lives were hanging in the balance. The prosecutor guided him carefully, asking what he remembered, what he saw, what he heard. At first, Drew focused on sensations rather than faces. But then the questions turned sharper. More direct. And that's when everything changed. The prosecutor asked the question no one dared to breathe. Do you see the person who fired the shot in this courtroom today? For a split second, Drew hesitated. The room held its breath. Then Drew lifted his arm and pointed straight across the room, right at the shooter. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Gasps erupted. Someone cried out. The accused stiffened, their face draining of color. The judge slammed the gavel, shouting for order, but it barely cut through the shock rippling across the room. Carly's hand flew to her mouth. Michael shot to his feet in disbelief. Nina froze, her mind racing as the implications slammed into her all at once. Drew didn't waver. His finger remained steady. There, he said firmly. That's the person who pulled the trigger. The courtroom descended into chaos. Attorneys shouted objections. The defense scrambled, clearly unprepared for such a direct accusation. The judge threatened contempt charges as the gallery erupted into whispered disbelief. This wasn't vague testimony. This wasn't circumstantial evidence. This was an eyewitness identification. And it changed everything. The shooter's carefully constructed composure shattered. Anger flashed across their face, quickly replaced by fear. They glanced around as if searching for an escape, physical or legal. But there was none. Not now. During a brief recess, Drew was surrounded by quiet support. Curtis offered a firm nod of respect. Carly squeezed Drew's hand, whispering that he had done the right thing, even if it put him in danger. Michael thanked him, his voice thick with emotion. He knew how hard it was to relive trauma publicly. He knew how much courage it took to point a finger and speak the truth when the consequences could be severe. Drew didn't respond with confidence. He responded with honesty. I couldn't stay silent anymore, he said quietly. People deserve the truth. Those words carried weight. Because in Port Charles, telling the truth often comes at a high price. While some praised Drew's bravery, others reacted with fury. The accused allies were not quiet. Glares were exchanged. Heated whispers filled the corridors. One chilling threat was overheard, an unmistakable warning that Drew had crossed a line and would pay for it. Security tightened immediately. Because when powerful people are exposed, retaliation is never far behind. Drew knew it. Carly knew it. And anyone who had lived in Port Charles long enough knew it too. The truth had been spoken. Now came the consequences. Back in session, the defense attempted to discredit Drew's testimony. They questioned his memory. They raised concerns about trauma affecting perception. They suggested manipulation. But it didn't stick. Because Drew didn't just identify the shooter. He explained details only the shooter would know. Details that aligned perfectly with physical evidence. Each answer tightened the noose. And with every passing moment, the shooter's fate looked increasingly sealed. Under pressure, cracks began to show. The shooter's posture stiffened. Their jaw clenched. Their eyes burned with barely contained rage. When their attorney tried to redirect attention, it only made things worse. The jury watched closely. They saw fear. They saw anger. And they saw guilt. Drew's single gesture had undone months of lies. News spread quickly. Phones buzzed. Whispers traveled faster than facts. By the time court recessed, all of Port Charles knew what had happened. Drew Cain had pointed at the shooter. And nothing would ever be the same. Alliances began to crumble. Old secrets resurfaced. People started questioning who they could trust, and who they had been protecting without realizing it. The town was shaken to its core. The emotional cost for Drew. Despite his calm exterior, Drew paid a heavy price for his testimony. Nightmares returned. Anxiety lingered. He understood that speaking out made him a target, but he refused to regret it. Because silence would have been worse. Because living with the truth mattered more than living comfortably with a lie. Still, the danger was real. And it wasn't over. This wasn't just a courtroom moment. It was a reckoning. Drew stood before Port Charles and chose truth over fear. He pointed directly at the shooter, and in doing so, ignited a chain reaction that will shake lives, destroy alliances, and invite dangerous retaliation. Encouraging words may help him stand tall. Angry threats may try to silence him. But the truth is out. The baptism has begun. And the fallout is only just beginning. Michael asked Christina to help him explain to Wiley that Willow married Drew, since he didn't know how to partake the news without letting his son know how furious he was about it. When Christina asked what his plan was after telling Wiley, Michael declared that he would allow the kiddies to be in the same house as Drew and hoped that Willow's marriage disqualified her as a mama in the eyes of the judge. Advising her family not to let his wrathfulness for Willow show to the kiddies, especially since they'd been caught between arguing parents themselves when they were youngish, she suggested he simply tell Wiley the verity about Willow marrying Drew. Also, when Wiley asked when he could next see his mama, Michael should say he wasn't sure because that decision was over to a judge. Christina also told Michael that he can't pass any judgment on Willow and what she's done, but demanded to be there for Wiley and assure his son that he's not going anywhere. Later, after Michael informed Wiley about his mama's change in connubial status, the little boy's first question was if his mama looked enough. Forcing a smile, Christina participated that Scout had been there and said that Willow looked beautiful, and Wiley wondered why he and Amelia hadn't been included. Michael reminded Wiley that he couldn't see his mama until the judge said so, and Wiley cried that he didn't want to live at Drew's house. Promising his son that the Courtamain house was his home and he wouldn't have to leave, Michael hugged Wiley and shot a pointed look at his family. More safe than sorry. Justine was irked that, a week down from Willow's trial, Dante and Nathan were bringing in a new suspect, claiming it was handing reasonable mistrustfulness to the defense on a tableware server. Dante argued that they couldn't ignore the new substantiation from the brown dog bartender who'd seen Curtis arrive laterally than he'd firstly claimed. Just also, the subpoenaed footage from the Savoy security company came through on Nathan's tablet, and the three of them watched the videotape showing Selena Wu enter the club, which contradicted Curtis's statement that he'd been alone, after Dante informed Justine that Curtis and Selena had a history since the Lady Tuffy formerly ran a poker ring out of the Savoy. The acting DA questioned how Curtis would have gotten Edward Quartermain's gun. Dante mused that Curtis might have swiped it while conducting sun-up business with Michael at the manse, and Nathan suggested that it was possible Portia got it herself during a meeting with Monica at the house. Since the gun eventually ended up at Willow's room at Elizabeth's house, Justine informed Dante and Nathan that they either had to tie Curtis to Drew's firing or clear him of it before Willow's trial began so the defense could make a stir to have the case dismissed. Fear mode. Calling Isaiah to her office, Portia told him she demanded to tell Curtis about their affair. When Isaiah questioned the timing, a panicked Portia explained that she had a motive to shoot Drew, which the defense now knew about, and if she was questioned during Willow's trial, she'd have to partake her whereabouts and reveal that they'd been together. She added that after the lengths Curtis had gone to cover her from the disquisition, she owed it to him to tell him. Isaiah combated that she didn't owe her estranged hubby anything, and she'd only be provoking Curtis by jumping ahead since she hadn't indeed been called as a substantiation. But if it came down to it, Isaiah said, Portia should discover that they'd been together, and he'd deal with the implicit fallout to his career. Barging into Curtis's office, Nina blazoned that she demanded to talk to him about Portia and the baby, and he was surprised that Nina indeed knew Portia was awaiting. Nina also explained how Alexis's strategy was to show that other implicit suspects may have shot Drew, and she'd fed Portia's name to someone who told Alexis. Furious with his friend for pecking both him and Portia in the reverse, Curtis condemned Nina for guarding her son at the expenditure of his future baby. By trying to keep Willow out of captivity, you may have just assured that my child will be born in one, he fumed. Contending that Alexis may not have indeed done anything with the information, Nina questioned if Curtis believed that Portia may have done it, and let Willow take the fall. Curtis argued that Willow had just as big a reason as anyone differently to want Drew gone, thanks in part to Nina herself. As they continued to squabble over Nina using Portia as a defense strategy for Willow, Nathan arrived. Curtis paced behind his office as Nathan attended his family out into the hallway. The operative also arrested Curtis. Arriving at the sunup office, Portia was surprised to see Nina standing in the hallway. She stormed into her hubby's office just as Nathan was finishing reading Curtis's rights. As Nathan walked him out, Curtis instructed Portia to call his counsel. Evidence of deceit. While staying for Nathan to return to the PCPD with Curtis, Dante and Justine reviewed prints of Ashford and Selena from the security footage, and Dante suggested that, as a former Bobby, Curtis was too smart to criminate himself. When Nathan brought a shackled Curtis into the interrogation room, Justine informed him that they demanded him to fill in some serious gaps from his statement about the night Congressman Kane was shot. When he refused to speak until his attorney was present, Turner presented a print of Selena at the Savoy shortly before Drew's firing. She added that they could stay for his counsel, but the police would need to know what he'd bandied with Selena Wu that night. Out in the team room, Dante thanked Nathan for his sapience on the case and commended that he wouldn't be happy if Curtis turned out to be the shooter, but they had to be certain before they moved forward. Justine also exited the interrogation room with Curtis and an officer, and instructed that Mr. Ashford be reserved on inhibition of justice and making a false statement. Back at the sanitarium, an angry Portia slammed her phone down on her office as Isaiah entered her office. He assumed she'd told Curtis about their affair, but she replied that she hadn't had the chance because her hubby was arrested. She wasn't sure what the charges were, Portia added, but Nina was there, and it had to be related to Drew. When she wailed that it was all her fault because she'd gotten blackmailed by Drew in the first place, Isaiah asked what Drew had on her. Sniffling that all she'd been trying to do was cover her son, Portia gripped her belly in pain and fell to the bottom. Practice makes perfect. Ticked off that Alexis didn't plan to have her swear, Willow claimed that it was important the jury hear from her that she didn't shoot the man she loved. She was no longer the weak woman who fell piecemeal after the guardianship hail, she added, and she'd make the jury believe her. Alexis felt that, grounded on once trial runs, Willow wouldn't swear faultlessly, and the pitfalls overbalanced the benefits. When Willow reiterated that she'd gotten more, Suzanne suggested they do a practice run with her as an unprejudiced jury. Drew misdoubted Suzanne could be unprejudiced, but after Alexis assured them that her adjunct had great sapience into how evidence would land, Willow declared she wanted to be questioned. During the mock interrogation, Alexis brought up the multiple ways Drew's advice had led to Willow losing guardianship of her children, demonstrating how easy it would be for the execution to prove that she had a motive to shoot him. As Suzanne recorded down notes, Alexis brought up Willow and Drew's failed first attempt to marry, forcing Willow to reveal that she hadn't gone through with it because she'd learned about Drew's affair with her mama. When Alexis's coming question circled back to the night of the firing, Willow revealed that chancing out Drew had been shot was so terrible that she'd swooned. Fighting back gashes, Willow declared that she couldn't believe anyone would suppose she shot her hubby because she loved him and demanded him. Also, Willow flashed back to her marriage day, when she'd told Nina that she didn't need to love Drew and would do anything to get Wiley and Amelia back. Impressed with Willow's performance, Drew raved about her perfect statement, but Alexis placarded Willow couldn't say any of that on the stage because it sounded like she was trying to manipulate the jury. Asked by Alexis for her opinion, Suzanne declared Willow shamefaced, explaining that the defendant had come across as protective and replied sprucely to having implicit motives to shoot Drew. When Drew angrily jumped to Willow's defense, she instructed her hubby to back down, wanting to hear what differently Suzanne had to say. Suzanne editorialized that Willow gave too numerous details, as if she had to justify everything she was saying, but that her love for her children came across easily. Willow was happy to hear that, but Alexis's adjunct noted that it was going to be her biggest liability since it was egregious she'd do anything for them, including trying to kill someone. Telling Willow that it was her decision to swear or not, Alexis added that she trusted Suzanne's instincts and recommended her customer do so as well. After all, Alexis noted, Willow formerly had a well-proved list of bad opinions. Also, Nina slogged in and blazoned that no one would have to swear because the charges against Willow were about to be dropped. During a deception meeting with Lucy, Brooke Lynn, and Felicia, representing Maxie, at Windmere, Sidwell blazoned his plan to bring the brand back into the black by dealing them his zincite and other minerals at cost. Brooke Lynn was irked to learn that he and Lucy had preliminarily bandied the matter and questioned why Sidwell would take such a huge mega-hit on the harborage freights. By having the minerals packed directly to Piers 55 and 56, Sidwell said he wouldn't eat any of the cost, but Brooke Lynn misdoubted her Uncle Sonny would be that generous. She and Felicia were stunned when he revealed that he was copying the Corinthos Piers. Felicia questioned why Sonny would vend to the very man he'd fought Measure C against, and Jens replied that he'd upped his offer mainly, so indeed Sonny Corinthos must have a price. When he next informed them that a non-negotiable reservation was that all accoutrements imported for deception be under his exclusive operation, so prices doen't helical out of control, Brooke Lynn refused to allow him to poke the company's name on all his significances without their supervision, and claimed that Tracy wouldn't be okay with it either. Pascal also entered the living room with fresh macarons, but Sidwell turned the butler down. He asked Lucy to explain to her associates how he was confident deception could reach indeed loftier heights with the new arrangement than before Maxie's woeful incident. As Lucy stood by his side, twisting her hands together, Sidwell professed that they had to help deception from going void, and his offer would achieve that. Having formally graded the figures, Lucy refocused out that Brooke Lynn and Tracy wouldn't be impacted financially if deception collapsed, and she had her real estate career to fall back on, but Maxie would suffer the most. Averring that Sidwell's arrangement was the only way they could save the company, Lucy prayed Brooke Lynn to get on board for Maxie's sake, and Brooke Lynn reluctantly agreed. Their meeting concluded, Sidwell crossed to the office to call Marco to begin the paperwork. Lucy informed Brooke Lynn and Felicia that she was going to hang around Windmere a while longer and promised to call them if deception came up in discussion. Out in the foyer, Felicia and Brooke Lynn gathered their fleeces, and both agreed that commodity about the deal sounded sketchy. Brooke Lynn lumbered that she wasn't crazy about how close Lucy had gotten with Sidwell, and Felicia noted that the other woman had always had a thing for important men with deep pockets. As she and Brooke Lynn exited the castle, Felicia looked back into the living room to see Lucy laughing with Sidwell. Meanwhile, Lucy asked Jens for consolation that the deal was the stylish way to save deception. Reaching for her hands, Sidwell replied that he'd numerous trials in the workshop, and Deception's success was a vital part of it. Just as you're vital to me, he added, pulling her in for a kiss. In the room where she was being held and turned, Anna flipped open a tablet to a communication that read "Faith will get you out," also folded down the corner of the runner so the communication read "Faison you will get out." She next looked at a runner with Britt and Nathan's names written down, and flashed back to the discussion she and Dante had about Faison's children resurfacing at the exact time that Jack Brennan demanded information about the miscreant from Valentine, and her fear that Faison had again faked his death. Trying to figure out where she was being held, Anna continued to walk herself through the events girding her hijacking, recalling that at one point, she'd traveled by water. Latterly, a voice came over an intercom system, instructing Anna, in French, to face the wall and put her hands behind her head. Entering the room with a plate of macarons, Pascal blazoned that he'd brought her a treat to enjoy since she'd been a model guest. Although her back was to him, Anna sounded to Fate the man's voice. What do you suppose of Pascal's involvement in Anna's hijacking? Do you suppose Curtis's arrest will lead to the charges against Willow being dropped before her trial begins? Will the stress of her estranged hubby's legal straits beget Portia to lose the baby? Partake your propositions about the rearmost occasion of GH in the commentary below.